Hi everyone, I'm Sanjana Balaraman, the Community Engagement Manager at Pando, and we're back with another episode of Crossroads Inspiring Leaders of Tomorrow series. Today, I have with me a very interesting, illustrious guest who will share her views on the multiple dimensions of leadership and business transformation, along with her rich experience in our conversation. She's a vibrant, multifaceted personality. She's a persuasive and influential leader at the C-level who's passionate about enabling organizations to stay competitive in the digital era. She's a thought leader credited with transforming businesses, conceptualizing new business models, and reimagining customer experiences. Her strength lies in building a culture of customer centricity, as well as in nurturing her teams and empowering individuals. She's a technology evangelist. Her repertoire includes AI/ML, metaverse, blockchain, IoT, robotics, drones, data analytics, and cloud. She has influenced, motivated, and led cross-functional multicultural teams, managed multi-million-dollar budgets, worked with multiple partner ecosystems, including startup, enterprise technology vendors, academia, and government. She's a life leadership coach and is an independent director on the board of an automotive e-commerce company. In addition to all this, she's also an angel investor and mentor to startups, especially in technology, fintech, education, health, humor, and sustainability space. Starting her career as a Japanese language translator, she served the Australian High Commission as visa officer, co-founded InfoNetMap Technologies, been in marketing, business development, and consultancy for several B2B marketing firms, led Taj Hotels as AVP Internet Marketing, and was the leader for digital transformation and innovation for the Mahindra Group. I'm happy to introduce Namrita Mahindro, Chief Digital Officer at Aditya Birla Chemicals. Welcome, Namrita, to Pando and our Crossroads series.
Thanks, Sanjana. Great to be here, and thank you for the very generous and kind introduction.
No worries. We'll just dive in and get started with the conversation. I'm excited to learn more from you. I think to start off with, you're incredibly successful in juggling so many things at once. And I think that introduction kind of speaks to that. There's so many aspects of your personality and of your life that you're kind of, that are in play at the same time. Your varied interests and passions, people management, your board membership, role as a mentor and coach. Looking back, what do you think is your secret sauce? If you had to talk to other women or men who want to don this hot seat, what is the advice that you would give to them?
I think, Sanjana, let me start by saying that I have been extremely fortunate to have a set of really good mentors and leaders all along my professional and my personal journey. And I think that has been instrumental in, helping me reach where I am today. A lot of things started serendipity. I just went with the flow, and one thing led to another. And of course, one had to put in the hard work to create that value, to drive that impact. But I think that's been sort of, the starting point of, when something is happening, whether it is in alignment with, your own desires and wishes or not, sort of go with the flow. At times that works fairly well for you. I think when we talk about, the secret sauce for success, I'll draw an analogy here with the English language.
Sure.
And I use this analogy in many different contexts, just as in the English language, you have the vowels, which are instrumental in constructing any word. There's certain ingredients in my life or certain things which are important for me, which have led me to the path and the destination that I am today in. So let me start by saying, as cliched as it sounds, being authentic has been extremely important for me. And what I mean by being authentic is really, I've focused on my strengths. I've focused on, where is it that I can create the maximum value? Knowing myself has been extremely important in that journey. And therefore, playing to my strengths, being who I am, irrespective of, the environment that I may be in, has been sort of important in that, in that journey. I think the E in the vowels set stands for two things for me. One is being empathetic. And I'd say this comes a little more naturally to me. I can't pinpoint on the source, but yes, I think it does come a little bit more naturally to me. And I think in this post-COVID world, it has become an even more critical life skill.
Definitely.
A very important leadership trait without which, it is difficult to move on. I think it was always there. It's just got more pronounced now. The other E, which is equally important for me, is empowerment. And this is an interesting one because when I started my journey as an entrepreneur, the ownership of outcomes left me feeling very empowered. And then fast forward a few years and I was, studying some of the most progressive organizations when I was looking at digital transformation and a lot of change management and trying to understand what was it that these organizations were doing differently to what, other good organizations were doing. So be it the Disneys of the world or the Southwest Airlines or, the Nostradamus of the world. And what I found was that in a lot of these cases, the secret sauce for them was empowered employees. So I started checking on this with the organizations that I was working with. And I've been doing this over the past 10 years. And as new cohorts of management trainees came in, spoke in, at different forums, engaged with people internally and externally, I realized that empowerment actually was something which was important as an individual to every employee. And it increased the employee job satisfaction and retention significantly. And interestingly, on the consumer side, it helps in creating a far better customer experience. So I think that is the second E, which sort of, has stood with me over a fairly long period of time. I perspective, and I'm just going into the vowels one by one.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's been a lot of insights-based innovation. And again, I'm going back to, 20 years back or almost 20 years back. This was 2005. I was working in the automotive industry in the UK. And a particular legislation was passed whereby, anything which was sold through distance selling, which included call centers and the internet, could be returned by the customers within a week's time. When this announcement came by the government, there was complete panic in the industry. We were selling cars in the sense of, taking advances against car registrations, on calls as well as online. And so, in this situation of, what should we do? How should we manage this? The concern that, people could actually drive away with their cars and then return them after a week left everyone feeling very uncomfortable. What had coincided with this was we had done some market research just before this announcement came in, and it validated the point that, it's a highly emotional purchase with very high involvement and attachment. And I used this insight to recommend that we actually turn this legislation on its head and run a marketing campaign in one or two of the smaller cities in the UK. And we ran that campaign, and what we found was that the cancellation numbers that we had, the percentage that we had, did not change significantly despite running this campaign, but our bookings went up manyfold. And a quarter of testing this in one city, with 2 cities, we rolled it out across the nation. So it's really about, when you get these kind of insights from research, from data, and how do you use it to really change the game? So I think that's one example, but, I have had instances of taking a similar approach repeatedly over the course of my career. I think the other aspect that I would like to spend a minute on is really, being open as a person. I think one has to operate from a space where one looks at the greater self. And this comes from a little bit of a philosophical and spiritual path that I follow. But it's really focusing on what is the greater good, the ability to emerge beyond your smallest self. And what I mean by that is the greater good could be the good of your team, the organization, the ecosystem, in the larger life space in terms of the society, the nation, and then the globe. But for me, again, practicing this, thinking that there is my self-interest, and sometimes that self-interest may be in conflict with a greater interest. And in times like that, looking at the greater interest of the larger good, I think making that sacrifice in some cases has again held me in good stead. And finally, I think it's really been a journey of unlearning, learning, and relearning. The need to self-disrupt and evolve as a better version of myself. I see that as a lifelong quest, a journey that I've been on for a fairly long time, and I think it'll continue, till I'm around.
No, that's such a cool. I like how you put it into the AEIOU. It's so easy to remember. Also, I think I definitely learned something from what you've said so far. And so we're off to a really great start.
Thank you.
So you've obviously led award-winning end-to-end transformations around omni-channel customer experience, manufacturing, and supply chain. Not just for Aditya Birla Chemicals, but also for Mahindra Auto and Club Mahindra and Taj Hotels, right? So two-part question is, where did you see the biggest disruption? And what does it really take to plan for an organization's digital transformation journey? I imagine it's this massive project that's just kind of looming in front of you when you take it up. What goes into kind of building capabilities for a digital first organization?
I have been in this space, Sanjana, in the digital transformation space, I would say, since about 2011, 2012. So over the last decade, I've really seen three very distinct waves of transformation. I'd say the first one was from about 2011 to 2015, and this was when I was making my foray into the space. I saw digital transformation gaining a lot of traction in India. It was, of course, evolving far more rapidly internationally. A lot of the work, however, in India was more in the customer experience space, owned by a lot of marketing teams. And the challenge was when you were looking at these large transformations, there was significant investment which was required. But there wasn't too much clarity in terms of, alignment of metrics, what kind of ROI you would get. And on top of that, most organizations were very comfortable working in silos. So looking at how do you, on the one hand, look at delivering impact, and on the other hand, look at building capabilities and a mindset shift to happen, across people within the organization were some of the challenges in that first wave. In the second wave, and I'll take that period from about 2016 to about 2019, 2020, just before COVID started. And that was the phase where, in India, and again, I'm going in a specific a little bit over here, internationally, transformation, of course, had gained a lot of traction. And in India also, we were seeing capabilities being built both on the demand and the supply side. There were a lot of first-time CDOs on the client side. There was very heavy investment from an M&A point of view on the supply side, bringing in best practices from, the learnings from, other geographies. And transformation now started looking beyond customer experience very holistically at end-to-end businesses, new business models, operational excellence, and really looking at saying the capability building implied an organization-wide digital DNA creation. And this was being given a lot of serious thought. The third wave for me was when the pandemic started, and it continues till date in some sense. And over these last 3 years or so, I think what organizations and industries have realized is that if they hadn't self-disrupted themselves already, they were being disrupted by the pandemic. They were being disrupted by,
there was no more choice.
There was no choice.
Yeah.
Right? And so digital transformation for the first time in a lot of the laggard industry specifically started moving from a push to a pull. And this journey has been accelerated many-fold. And there are a lot of memes which have been going around over the last 3 years around this, but that is a fact. It has been accelerated many-fold over the last 3 years. Now, if you look at it from a disruption point of view, I'd say the last wave was definitely the most disruptive. It was the most disruptive for organizations who were already on this journey, because the kind of scale and exponential growth that they saw and the associated challenges were transformational. And for those who hadn't started the journey, obviously they were sort of forced into having a very hard look. An existential crisis is how I would think it was for most organizations who hadn't already embarked on this journey. That was sort of, from a perspective of this last phase, of course, being the most disruptive in that sense. From a point of view of, capability building, I think there has been, again, a sort of consistent thread over the last 5 to 7 years, I would say, where I've been seeing, certain best practices, if I may call it, that I've used across the Mahindra Group and now at Aditya Birla, and they seem to be paying good dividends in terms of building capability. I think one aspect is when we're looking at transformation, a lot of it is you may start the journey by saying that, I want to get in external talent who understands the digital technology. But technology requires a combination of the business context, of the business understanding. And therefore, while we started the journey with a lot of experts, but we were simultaneously looking at upskilling our own teams, reskilling our own teams. And this was not just theoretical, capability building in terms of getting them to go and do programs, but also sort of get them, hands-on with projects where they had to apply these new learned skills, whether it was in the data analytics space, whether it was in the AR, VR space, whether it was from an IoT perspective. In all of these areas, we made the learning a hybrid approach of theoretical learning, which was applied pretty much, hand in hand on a live project, which had a business impact. So I think that was one aspect, whether it was with our IT teams, and there were a lot of IT teams, who had traditional IT capabilities. They didn't necessarily have the new age digital technology capabilities and skills. And so for them to upskill themselves. For a lot of the business teams, just starting with even something as simple as data analytics, because that is a horizontal skill, irrespective of whether you're in HR or finance or any other function, it is going to be relevant for you. So therefore, building the capabilities over there so that people start actually thinking of their problem statements differently, looking at the information that they have differently, looking at their decision-making differently became important. The second aspect, I think, which got accelerated during COVID was really looking at our own ecosystems. So beyond the business and the IT teams, I think we've been extremely fortunate at Aditya Birla. We had, even prior to COVID, built our own centers of excellence around certain key technologies. And during COVID, I think the synergy or the partnership that we created with these, ABG or Aditya Birla Group resources became significant for us in ensuring that we could continue working on our journey, accelerating our journey, and actually, moving forward without any hiccups, because this was the time when there were hiring freezes, when, it was difficult to get talent, working remotely was a challenge. So here we had teams who had the skills, and we borrowed resources from them. We worked collectively with them, and we made sure that, our transformation journeys were not impacted. We look at for build, operate, transfer model, whereby we get in external resources to keep the process, but we ensure that over a defined period of time, we have actually handed over the reins of the transformation to the business. And they are part of the journey right from the beginning. So that's sort of been, a success mantra for us. And the second aspect is really, leveraging the ecosystem of partners internally and externally, really to ensure that, we have the right capabilities to solve a problem. And while I talked about the internal, the Aditya Birla Group ecosystem, the COEs that we have, we've also done a lot of work with the startup ecosystem, with academia, and leveraged some of these partners for competencies that we necessarily didn't have in-house, which would take forever to build. So I think it's that synergistic approach which has been key for capability building, and it's a journey. We're still on that journey as we speak. But yes, I think it works, it delivers results, and creates a win-win for all the stakeholders.
Yeah, and I think what you said about starting with external expertise, but then ensuring that you hand it over to internal teams by upskilling them, it also creates both an like a atmosphere of inclusion, because you're not handing it all over externally, and ownership, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So moving on to our next question, I think it's really interesting that with each new position, you've kind of tried to do something different, something new, right? Was it a conscious decision to kind of expand your horizon and explore new territories each time? What were the kind of challenges along the way, and how did you tackle them?
So Sanjana, as I mentioned earlier, this philosophy of learning, unlearning, and relearning became a part of my DNA very early on in life. And it became the driving force for a lot of the shifts in my career and in my life. So in that sense, the changes have been conscious, in the sense of pushing my limits, expanding my horizons, looking at painting a new canvas periodically, sometimes not knowing at all what, the new may look like, but, the need to reinvent myself was something which was and still is always, at the back of my mind. So it's if I may borrow, from manufacturing, the twin engine, or from digital transformation, the twin engine of saying, here is something that I'm doing in my day job, but, how do I disrupt myself? Not just to do this, but to expand my canvas. I mentioned that, this journey started early on. So let me share another anecdote with you over there.
Yeah.
This happened sometime after my 10th boards, if I remember correctly. My dad was, standing with me, and we were just looking out of, our house. And there was a laborer who was toiling really hard outside the house. It was the middle of the afternoon, over a weekend. We both were looking at that laborer, and he said, remember always in life that, you have two choices. Those two choices are really that you can either work hard right now and reap the fruits later, or like this laborer, have a ball right now, enjoy yourself thoroughly, but you may end up struggling for the rest of your life. And the way he said it, and the image of that laborer in front of me that afternoon just left an impression on me. And that kind of became a guiding force to say, can I become a better version of myself? Each day, each week, each month, each year. So really that sort of, has been the compass for always saying, am I growing? Am I evolving? Am I becoming a better version of myself? Now, of course, with that kind of change, thought process, and then the actual change which follows it, it does imply that, there will be more often than not, very steep learning curves, new industries, new sectors, new cultures. And I think from a point of view of, looking at that, if I may call that a challenge, I looked at it in terms of, one, again, playing to my strengths. I'm a fairly hands-on person and I enjoy getting into the details of, things till I understand them. And so I think that kind of helped in understanding the nuances of every industry, what was key, what was important. And given that, I've had the opportunity to work across multiple cultures, multiple geographies, the philosophy I followed was when in Rome, be like the Romans. So really imbibe their best. So observe what is it that they're doing? What is it that you like? What is it that inspires you? And then imbibe it into your own life. And I think that kind of, again, that mindset of looking at the positives, of looking at what can I learn? What can I do differently from what I was doing yesterday? I think helped in overcoming the challenges. Of course, another challenge, irrespective of, the changes or the geographies or, the growth from a career trajectory perspective, was managing different kinds of stakeholders and developing teams more importantly. I think the quest has always been, as I mentioned right at the beginning, I have been extremely fortunate. And I wanted to then, for the role models that I had, I wanted to, in some senses, become a role model for my teams. How could I continue inspiring them, influencing them, helping them develop into capable leaders? And I think that sort of became a guiding force for really taking on different kinds of roles, be it my role as a mentor, be it my journey into coaching. So these sort of, were the positive outcomes of, overcoming some of these challenges. And then finally, as you mentioned right at the beginning, my journey has been one of continuous change. And I think it goes back to looking at change from the lens of the person who's getting impacted and ensuring that there's a high degree of alignment. What is in it for them? Why would they change? If I can put myself in their shoes, and if I can understand why would they make this change? Why would they want to make this change? Because change is painful. Yeah. I think that ability to be empathetic, that ability to, see things from another person's lens, helped me manage some of that change, whether it was as a digital evangelist right at the start of my career or, subsequently in the last decade from a transformation perspective, especially, 2011, 2012, transformation was still this unknown, thing. Everybody heard about it. There was lots of news about it, but it was a buzzword. Yeah, exactly. It was a buzzword. So uncovering that, understanding, did it have an alignment with what I was interested in and how it would help me grow? And would it help me deliver the kind of impact I wanted? I think just going through that journey of change myself as an individual before, I could build the skills and start offering it as a competency, to the external world. I think it was really looking at, what would this deliver for my organization? What would this deliver for the larger industry per se, if I embarked on this journey? And that's just to give one example. But yeah, I think these were some of the challenges along the way. But for each challenge, I think I managed to find something which would resonate with me and would help me take the best out of that situation. So in some senses, I saw every challenge as an opportunity to grow, to reinvent myself.
I think that's also really brave, right? Like you said, when you entered digital transformation, it was little more than a buzzword, and you kind of got the chance to define it yourself, which is very, very cool. But also very brave, because I mean, a lot of people might not take that chance, right? And it's obviously paid off for you.
Yes, I think that's been a recurring theme on a risk barometer. I would like to believe that I'm somewhere on a 6 or 7, but yes, some of the gambles I've taken have, as I said, I've been extremely fortunate. They've worked out really well, and I just have gratitude for that. So yeah.
So globally, 19.7% of board seats are currently held by women, according to a recent Deloitte study. You've obviously had a very successful C-level career and are on the board of an auto firm. Could you talk a little bit about your journey in how you got there and how it happened? What would be your advice for aspiring young women to kind of grab these great positions and increase diversity in the board composition?
My exposure to boards, Sanjana, started when I was actually in the UK way back in 2005, 2006, around that time. And I was intrigued and inspired by, being in these board settings. If I fast forward a decade later, when I started, doing a lot more work in the transformation space, for the kind of change we were talking about, this definitely in all cases needed board approvals, needed board buy-ins, needed board alignment, and reporting on a continuous basis. And that is where I think my interest in boards, in corporate governance, in looking at the bigger picture beyond my function, beyond the organization, also sometimes the impact on society, the kind of the different facets of decision making that one looks at, beyond just the very narrow view that one carries maybe in a functional role. So that came to the fore, and that sort of interested me. And then I started wondering, what would it take to be also on the other side of the table? And I started that journey by researching what kind of roles are there, what would make sense. I got myself certified as an independent director, started networking, sharing my interests in corporate governance, read up a lot more about that space. And I think over a period of time, it was about engaging with relevant stakeholders. It was learning about this discipline and finding opportunities to engage increasingly with the board, sometimes informally, sometimes formally, and observing them in terms of what does it entail, the nuances, the unspoken words, etc. And I think over a period of time, as I went along this journey, I had the confidence that I could sit on the other side of the table and be a part of that side also. So I think after that, it was really spreading the word and showing my interest in the space, and my desire to take on an independent director's role. And again, as I said, I've had mentors in this space, and they've been extremely kind. And I was reached out by a couple of boards, and then I think it was just a synergistic conversation which led me onto getting onto my first board. I think I've been now on a board for about almost a year, so it's still early days as I look at it. I would have a couple of recommendations, having been on this journey for some time now. The first thing is, ideally, if one can try, one should try and get onto the board of their own organization. And I know this is different to what I am doing. But the reason I'm saying that is because, you're again taking on a very different role from a very operational role that you're doing, even if you are in a management position, you're in a management role, and moving from there into a corporate governance role is slightly different. So I think looking at doing it first within your organization in reflection would be a good idea. The second aspect is also explore for opportunities. If you can't immediately get onto the board of your organization, and I understand that may be challenging many a times, look for opportunities like shadow boards. There are a lot of organizations which are offering shadow board roles, which means that you get to be an observer on the board. It means that you get the opportunity to actually be responsible for certain projects and present them back to the board, and engage with the board. So those are opportunities. Seek those opportunities out to build, yourself to be board ready. Also be very clear about what strength do you bring to the table. Because getting to the board, traditionally you will have a lot of competencies from the finance and the legal perspective, from a compliance point of view, because boards are very heavily compliance oriented. So if you don't come from that background, then what is it that you bring to the table? And I think having that understanding and alignment of its relevance to the board would also be extremely important. And my final advice would be prepare yourself well. Don't rush for your first board position. When I got certified as an independent director and when I took the first role, there was a gap of almost 2 or 3 years. Getting the right board with the right team, the right culture, and alignment of values is extremely important, because these are roles of extreme responsibility, when you are getting onto this role. So I would say prepare yourself well through some of the examples that I gave of things that you could do, and I think that's what I'd like to share at this point in time.
No, that's really interesting, because very often you hear about, and I'm speaking a little bit about my experience as well. You hear about people getting on boards and being board members, but you very rarely hear about the work that goes into getting there. And I think that's really interesting what you've shared with us. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
So you've led multicultural, multiple country, multifunctional teams across the globe very successfully, obviously. According to you, how should leaders build high EQ at the workplace in order to be influential across cultures and geographies? Because people are very different. I think there's an element of commonality between all of us, but at the end of the day, the way people do business in different places is, can always be a culture shock for people. So what is your advice to other leaders out there?
So Sanjana, I think when we look at, building high EQ, I think first of all, that's a lifetime journey. It's a lifetime process. I don't think, you can build it today and then you don't need to work on it, right? The second thing that I've observed is that to have high EQ, you really need to get onto an inward journey of self-awareness. And that allows you to build certain skills which will be helpful in that strengthening of the EQ competency. So for example, simple things like active listening, or Confucius said, and I try to follow it, 9 times or 9 thoughts to one word. And I've been trying to practice it for a long time and often failing. Responding to situations rather than reacting to situations. And these are all skills that you build over a period of time. And I'm just giving 2 or 3 examples over here. But really, the intent over here is, how do you get to know yourself? And for that, and I'm going back to that first point of getting to know yourself, what I personally found extremely helpful was the journey of coaching that I started on a couple of years back. And what that allowed me to do was really practice a lot of restraint, really look at reflecting. I think there are times when we get so caught up in our day-to-day lives, the need to reflect, the need to introspect, to set aside time for that, to understand oneself. Where is one going? What is one's purpose? Why are we, on this planet? And I know all of this sounds very philosophical, but I think when you start having those conversations with yourself, when you become more aware of yourself as a human being, I think that is when you can build better empathy, better, engagement, better relatability with others. I've been doing the coaching part, wearing this hat of a life and leadership coach for the last 1.5 years or so now. And part of this coach journey I've covered internally at Aditya Birla. And again, I've been extremely fortunate to have, uh, colleagues whom I've had the opportunity to coach, and externally also. And I think the one thing that comes to me increasingly is that, when you do engage on a coaching journey, working as much on yourself as you are working with another person, as you are working with another person to help them tap into their limitless self, help them tap into their greatest potential. There are things that you will learn about yourself in that process. There are things that you will, discover, which will come to you as a surprise sometimes. There are things that you will learn from other people's journeys. So I think from that point of view, as you embark on this journey of coaching, you start understanding people outside of the context of work many times. You start understanding the broader, you understand people for who they are as people. You start uncovering the layers beyond the corporate avatar layer that they are carrying. And I think that helps you build the EQ over a period of time.
I think that's a really interesting take on EQ, and probably very, very true that self-awareness is the key to EQ. I've not heard that before, but it sounds like your own kind of secret sauce. Going back to that first question.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I'd like to pivot now and kind of deep dive into how Aditya Birla Chemical is thinking about digital transformation in supply chain. Supply chain has obviously been a hot topic over the last couple of years. And the role of supply chains has become central to the success of the business, more so in the post-pandemic world, right? With geopolitical disruptions all around the world, manufacturers are facing resource shortages and there are critical service timelines. What do you think the supply chain of the future looks like? And how will digitization kind of enhance the customer experience as well as traceability?
I think what the pandemic has done is really shaken up the whole supply chain space. I think there was a comfort in large monolithic structures being set up and run very effectively in the pre-pandemic era. And I think in this post-pandemic era, what we are seeing over the last 2 odd years or so, and increasingly we'll see more and more of it, is really breaking down of these larger structures into smaller, more flexible, more dynamic structures of supply chains. We look at using information very differently from the way we were using information previously to deal with complexities. And that's where digital could come in terms of providing real-time information, in terms of providing data-led decision-making as opposed to decision-making based on what we were always doing. Building, dynamic hedges against uncertainty, even as we reconfigure the broader supply networks, will ensure that we have more diverse and more resilient supply portfolios as we move forward. In some senses, it's like looking at, what is it that will serve as the vaccine to the supply chain, similar to the vaccine that we developed for COVID, for human beings. And so, some of these aspects of looking at, being more modular, being more agile, being more flexible, being more transparent, all of this put together will actually create that next wave of transformation in supply chain that's already started. And a lot of organizations are already making those changes, managing risks. There are new kinds of risks that we had not been envisaged previously. So, defining what is a risk, managing those risks far more effectively, far more often than, if something was being looked at on an annual basis, looking at that today on a monthly basis is not uncommon. sometimes even on a weekly or on a daily basis. So really, making some of these changes at the organization level in terms of ensuring that we are agile, transparent, far more dynamic. We are doing a lot of scenario planning. We are looking at the larger ecosystem beyond just our organization, whether it is on the customer end or whether it is on the supplier end. All of these things have changed. We were only looking at tier one suppliers as an example in terms of what are the risks that they carry. Today we're looking at tier 2, tier 3 suppliers also. The risk models that we made are very different to what we had in the pre-COVID era. We're looking at seeing how do we ensure that there is real-time availability of information. So we had a control tower from a logistics point of view even in the pre-COVID era, but the level of detailing, bringing together safety, compliance and operational efficiency under one umbrella are some of the changes that we've done, from a logistical point of view. Going multimodal at a completely different level is another change which is, happening as we speak. Some of it was already affected. So really looking at the networks, looking at, resetting the networks, looking at, being a lot more connected, a lot more intelligent, and a lot more transparent, I think would be things that are going to be the key ingredients to creating a vaccine which will allow us not just to sustain, the disruptions which have happened in the past, but also in some senses, if there was the next disruption to happen, be that vaccine which will protect us from being thrown completely off guard.
And just out of curiosity, do you think that this spotlight that has been on supply chain over the last couple of years, do you think it's going anywhere, or it's going to stay fixed on supply chain for the time being?
I think it's here to stay. I think it is here to stay because the uncertainty that we have in the world is only going to increase. So the frequency, the velocity, and the impact of change, of risk, of different kinds of risks is only going to go up significantly. So ensuring that the supply chains, which in some senses to me are the nerve centers, are the spine of an organization, at least for organizations like ours which are into manufacturing. But that holds true for almost all organizations across sectors, across industries. That spine has to be healthy. That spine has to be robust. That spine has to be able to take the jerks of the VUCA world and then sort of bounce back. It's like the spine has to do its yoga. And the yoga right now for it is really becoming dynamic, agile, transparent, flexible, all of those things. So that to me is really what is going to keep the supply chain of tomorrow, healthy and robust. And it is going to remain a focus area. We've seen what has happened with the semiconductor industry. We've seen what has happened with a whole bunch of other industries. During the pandemic, post-pandemic, there are global events which are happening from a geopolitical point of view, from other perspectives. So I think it's here to stay. And it's a good space to be in where, this attention for the first time is coming in this magnitude on supply chain as a function, on looking at the importance of it, not just at a management level, but also at boards and beyond. And I think that is going to make sure that we become more anti-fragile by focusing more on it right now.
So thank you so much. That was such a great time talking to you. And I learned a lot, honestly, on this conversation. And I think I will be taking away some of these points that you shared and trying to work on things myself. So I'm sure anyone who's listening in is going to do the same. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you had a good time as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on board. And I think some of your questions are very interesting, made me reflect along the way. But yes, I think it's been good fun having this conversation with you, and I hope it does resonate somewhere, with your audiences also.
I'm sure it will. Thank you so much.